because the dependence refers to the merely labeled. Why do you say it twice? Merely labeled implies it's dependent on labeling.
But label does not say depending on cause and condition and parts.
No, but that is the subtlest level of dependence. So if you mention the subtlest levels, the coarsest level is implied. The subtlest level of dependence is, yes, it depends on causes and conditions, on parts, but even if it didn't depend on any of those, it would still depend on labels. That's the deepest level. The deepest level, when you understand that, this is what takes you to emptiness. The other ones are too coarse. They're still true, but they don't take you to the level of emptiness. Okay? Alright, we'll get to this. Okay, so going back to this, I've basically explained the first few verses of 26, and I want to now get to the point of this year's.
23.
Okay, let me just quickly go through it because I basically. Oh, I'm already on 24. Just quickly check. 20, 10, 6. Alright, so number 1 and 2 dealt with the I. Oh, no. Sorry,
Which chapter are we?
we're on 23. 23. We got to 23 yesterday, and I basically explained the first few verses of 23 now without reading them. Saying, with regard to attachment, aversion, and confusion or ignorance, confusion and ignorance, those two words are used interchangeably. Now those cannot exist in and of themselves because they depend on things other than themselves, such as pleasure, displeasure, and an erroneous or a wrong view of reality. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, of course, also the pleasant, unpleasant, etc. can't exist in and of itself. Because that depends, because that which arises in dependence on the pleasant, the unpleasant, or error, cannot exist inherently. Okay, so verse number 1 and 2 say, how can the afflictions exist inherently if they depend on something other than themselves, pleasure, etc.
What is error here?
Error means a wrong appearance of things, a wrong appearance, a wrong sense of reality. In dependence on that, you have a mind that wrongly perceives something. So just as you need pleasure for attachment, you need anger for, you need unpleasant experiences for anger, you need a mistaken appearance for ignorance.
What's Tibetan?
Tibetan for error. Wait, let me just look for it. Chinchilo. So, chinchilo in Tibetan, it's not the usual word for wrong. It's a word where you go, it's the opposite of what it is. So I had to find an English word, erroneous. I mean, it's kind of the opposite of what it actually is, but that's not easily said here. So, du means pleasant, midu means unpleasant, and then chinchilo means being the opposite of what it is. So erroneous, as in like wrong, as being the opposite of how it really exists. So that appearance needs to take place for an error, for an erroneous, for a wrong consciousness to arise, for an error to arise. So maybe error, you could say like chinchilo as in like an error. Then in verse 2, as I just said, therefore, those three cannot exist in and of themselves. And of course, there's also no person that has those aggregates. That doesn't exist. That's explained in verse 3. So if there's no one to whom the afflictions belong, you cannot talk of the afflictions of anyone. Right? Again, afflictions have no basis. Someone who holds those afflictions. And number 5, when we talk about the afflictions dependent on the mind, well, the mind and the afflictions, how do they relate to each other? Are they one? Are they separate? Does one possess the other possess the one? Or does one depend on the other and the other depend on the one? Or does the mind possess those? And again, this fivefold reasoning here, it's talking about inherently depending. Inherently dependent. As in like, to depend, you don't need anything else. Which again doesn't make sense. Right? So this goes a little bit, like so far we've not really talked about dependence existing inherently or not. Although we get a sense of that, that's our problem. When we believe things are merely labeled, the labeling now exists truly, or the dependence exists truly. But the independence is just labeled, independence on something else. So here it's saying that if we analyze the relationship between mind and afflictive emotions, of course an afflictive emotions is a mind. But when we think of the mind as something truly there, and an afflictive emotion as something truly there, then we check their relationship. Well, they're not truly one, they're not truly different. It's not one depends on the other, right? Or the other on the one, and we can't say one possesses it. It's like, this is a little harder to do with the mind and afflictive emotions. We do it with mind and body. Or sorry, with person and body, for instance. Okay? So the person is labeled on the basis of mind or body. I say I see Tomer when I see his face. There's Tomer. Oh, Tomer doesn't look happy, or Tomer is not happy. Based on his face, I label happy or not happy, for instance. Okay? Now, if Tomer existed inherently, his body would exist inherently, and how do the two relate? Are they one? Are they totally separate? That would be the only possibility. If they both existed inherently, either they would have to be one or totally unrelated. Okay? They couldn't be like dependent on each other, being related to each other, because that would imply independence, and since they exist inherently, they're not dependent. Then also, would Tomer, if they were independent, would he be inherently dependent? Would that dependence cannot be found? Some inherent dependence. His mind inherently, we say dependent in relation to other things. We label it dependence. That dependence cannot be found. But if his mind depended on, if his body depended on Tomer, we should find that dependence. Where's that dependence? Some solid dependence. No, it's merely labeled based on the fact that for me to say Tomer is there, I need to see him. Right? Based on that fact, I label Tomer as dependent on the body. Okay? So therefore, inherently, Tomer is not dependent on his body, and his body is not dependent on Tomer. Neither, and also the fifth fact is that Tomer does not possess his body. How do you find a possession? How do you find possession there? Tomer possesses. So we say, conventionally, yes, he possesses a body, but we cannot find that possession either. Okay? So, in that same way, as I took those two, Tomer and his body, I can take anger and the mind. Anger is a type of mind. They're not identical, are they? No, not every mind is anger. Are they totally separate? No, that would be bizarre. If anger is a mind, how can there be anger over here and affliction, like anger over here and the mind over there? That doesn't work. Is there a dependence, an inherent dependence of the mind depending on the anger? No. Or the anger depending on the mind? No, that dependence cannot be found. And is there some ownership of the mind having anger? We talk like that. Conventionally, it's okay to say that. But that ownership cannot be found. Am I making sense? Right? Okay. Then, 6, if the pleasant, unpleasant, and error do not exist inherently, so they are just labeled on the basis of certain emotions in the mind, pleasant, unpleasant. So they don't exist inherently. What afflictions are dependent? What afflictions are dependent? What inherent afflictions can be dependent on the pleasant, unpleasant, and error? And then, how does pleasant, unpleasant, and error arise? Well, it depends on form, sound, taste, and tangible objects. Well, smell, phenomenon, none of those exist inherently. Again, if they don't exist inherently, that which depends on them cannot exist inherently. Alright, so we've heard already, sense objects, their light waves, their pressure waves, they don't exist inherently as colors, etc. So then, these things, form, sound, taste, and tangible objects, smell, and phenomena, they are merely a city of Gandharvas. That's Shuki's way of saying, Shuki would say they're mere fantasies. They're like fantasies, right? So they're like a city. Here also they say they're merely a city that is like, they're like a city of Gandharvas. That's just a mystical idea of like beings that are called Gandharvas. And it's said that people have these, like an optical illusion, that there are these beings, like these mystical beings. You also find them explained, they're like celestial beings. You find them in the Hindu tradition, and they say that they appear to us as like living in a city, but when you get closer, they disappear. They disappear. So when you get closer to them, there's a sense, but we look closer and closer, and they start disappearing. So it's an illusion. I like the example of pixels. Where I live in Nagarjuna, I live in a small nunnery, and when I go down to the temple, you walk down the street, and there's a hotel, and in honor for His Holiness, they put up this mosaic of His Holiness. So the little pieces of stones, kind of put together, and there's like a mosaic, right, of His Holiness, right? So when you're really far away, you see His Holiness. When you get really close, it's just stones, right? So it's like the pixels on your computer, they're like mosaics, but just a little more sophisticated, right? They're like, I remember the first computers, they were not that sophisticated, so you could actually make out the pixels. So it's a bit like the mosaic. But really, it reminds me of that things seem very solid from afar, but when you get closer, and you look for, it's like looking at a mosaic, it's like looking, you don't find the object. So to me, that's like an analogy. It seems solidly to be His Holiness from afar. But really, objects, they seem from afar to be this, that, and the other. And when you analyze and you really look for that which makes it good or bad, you don't find it. Right? So, the city of Gandharvas is similar to that mosaic from afar. You see like the whole city. When you get closer, it disappears. It's just an illusion. Okay? So, other examples are usually in the city of Gandharvas, I use less. You may wonder, why do they use this? Well, there could be several reasons. The beings that Nagarjuna mainly taught this text to knew a lot about cities of Gandharvas. They had a good understanding, the example was familiar to them. So therefore, that was an example they found helpful. Also in terms of the meter, it sounded really good with the other words, because sounding good, people remember easier. So, for whatever reason, Nagarjuna chose this example. We wouldn't choose it in the 21st century. In fact, we don't know what Gandharvas are. But we know a lot of optical illusions. The mosaic, pixels, what else? The sun rising in the east. And we even, our whole language revolves around that illusion. It doesn't rise in the east. The sun is just, the earth is just moved in a certain way that it gives rise to that appearance. What else? Lots of other optical illusions.
Mirage.
Pardon?
Cinema.
Cinema, very good. What else?
Mirage.
Huh?
Mirage.
A mirage, exactly. You know, like in the hot Israeli day, like in Israel, you look at a desert or a road, and it seems like water is shimmering, a mirage of water. Again, there's no water. It appears to be water, but it isn't. It appears solidly there, but it isn't. Okay. So, actually, they're like mirages or like a dream. In a dream, in a dream, it seems so solid. You have sensual experiences, you feel the heat, you feel the cold, you smell the dirt, you smell and you wake up and it was like, there was no dirt, there was no. So like in a dream, okay, a dream is not the same. In a dream, the objects you dream about are actually not found outside. Here we're talking about a conventional existence. We're not saying it's totally, the mind just totally made it up. It's only like a dream. It's not a dream, it's like a dream. Because a dream elephant is not an elephant, but a merely imputed elephant is an elephant. It's a difference, right? Okay. Now, we saw that. Number 9. How would the pleasant and the unpleasant arise in ones who are like an illusory person and like a reflection? So, if they're just like a Gandharva, like a city of Gandharva, an illusory person, or like a reflection, here the word like is mentioned. So, how could they actually arise as an inherently existent thing? They couldn't. So oftentimes you have to add the word inherent. But the meter is destroyed by that in Tibetan or in Sanskrit, which is why the word inherent, it's like in the Heart Sutra, you say inherent at the very beginning, and it's assumed no eye, no ear, no nose, course not saying that they don't exist, it's saying that they don't exist inherently, because the word inherent was mentioned earlier. So the unpleasant, the pleasant, depending on which the pleasant is imputed, cannot exist. So here, so the unpleasant, depending on which the pleasant is imputed, cannot exist without depending on the pleasant. Therefore the pleasant is not tenable. Okay? So we can only have something unpleasant in dependence on which the pleasant is imputed, so it cannot exist, the unpleasant cannot exist without the pleasant, and the other way around. Okay? This is it in verse 11. The pleasant, depending on which the unpleasant is imputed, cannot exist without depending on the unpleasant. So the pleasant is depending on the pleasant, the unpleasant is imputed. But that pleasant cannot exist without depending on the unpleasant. So they depend on each other, in other words. So this is another way. Not only does it depend, my anger depends on something unpleasant. That in turn depends on sense objects, but also on the opposite. So dependence exists in many different ways. Alright, 13. Okay, now it's to do, so 11 and 12, basically, if there is no pleasant, this is 12. 10 and 11, they say that pleasant and unpleasant depend on each other. And that's pretty self-explanatory. And then if there is no pleasant, how can there be desire? If there's nothing pleasant to exaggerate, then how can there be desire? If you didn't experience something pleasant, you wouldn't have desire for it. If there's no unpleasant, you couldn't have aversion. Now, here we're talking about the error, the mistaken mind. And this is a little bit harder. It's a little bit more difficult. If we grasp at the view of the impermanent as permanent, okay, that which is impermanent is not permanent, is it? If I perceive something that is in actuality changing moment by moment, I would be wrong to perceive it to be permanent. Okay. But that which is empty is not inherently impermanent. Since, and here the word needs to be added, otherwise it doesn't make sense, but that's clear from the commentary. Since that which lacks inherent existence is not inherently impermanent, how could grasping at permanence be mistaken if perceiving something as inherently impermanent is not? In other words, we say this table is impermanent, okay? But to our mind, it's inherently impermanent, right? Not only do we say, oh, it's impermanent, it's inherently impermanent. Something within it. Just watch your own mind. Watch your own mind. I'll give you an example that you may find helpful. When we say inherent, take water. Is it inherent in water to be hot? No. Is it inherent in water to be cold? No, neither hot or cold. Why is it not inherent in water to be hot? Because can you have hot water? Absolutely. But it's not inherent in water to be wet, it's to be hot. Why? Because you need a stove, you need other factors to heat it up, and only then does it become hot. This is why using everyday kind of terminology, okay, as an analogy here, we say water is not inherently or naturally warm. Do you all agree? Now I'll ask you, is water inherently or naturally wet? And you would say, yes, because you don't need anything else. It just is wet. Sorry. From a Buddhist point of view, you also need other factors, which is why it's not naturally inherently wet, because it depends on other factors to be inherently or naturally wet. Am I making sense? So here you have an everyday example where to be like the example of heat, okay, that is not natural. Okay, that's not natural to the water. But we have a sense that wetness is natural to water. It's inherent in the water. This is what is meant here. It's within it, comes with it. You don't need anything else. You have water, you have wetness. No. That is where the mistake lies. Even wetness is dependent on many other factors, and therefore it is wet. So, likewise, here when we say, is the table naturally impermanent? You ever sense, yeah, if you have a table, it's changing. So is it inherent in the table to be permanent? Again, it's not. Impermanent is what we call this table, or it's a characteristic we ascribe to the table, in dependence on the fact that the table changes from moment to moment. Right? Therefore we label it impermanent. We can't find some intrinsic impermanence, like, oh, there's this yellow impermanence or whatever, right? We don't find that. So, therefore, the table is not inherently impermanent. But if you perceive the table to be inherently impermanent, that's mistaken. But if you said it is inherently impermanent, and that's not mistaken, it would not be mistaken to say it's permanent either. If you say the table, although it doesn't exist inherently impermanent, but you perceive it as that, and if you were to say that's not a mistake, well, it wouldn't be a mistake to say the table is permanent either. Because in both cases you're wrong. The table is not permanent, and it's not inherently impermanent either. Right? That's what he's saying here. So, if to grasp with the view of the impermanent as being permanent, that is mistaken, since what is empty of inherent existence cannot be inherently impermanent, how could grasping from your side at permanence be mistaken, but grasping at inherent impermanence not be mistaken? Does that make sense? Both must be mistaken.
Can you just explain how the wetness in the water is not inherent?
How is the wet? Oh, good.
Besides the mind.
How is the wetness? Good. This is where we clash. This is where our mind clashes in terms of previously it all made sense with the not table in the wetness.
Is it not like the koan that if you don't hear, if you are not in the mood?
Oh, wait. I'm not sure.
If you don't have skin.
Okay, yes. I think what you're saying is right. So wetness, what is wetness? What does it mean? It's dependent on a certain, right?
Sense.
Yeah, on the sense. I mean, if you perceive water as dry, we perceive it as wet. Okay? So in dependence on, it's like heat and cold. In dependence on what? It's a body sensation, we perceive it as wet. Okay? And then when we perceive that, and dependent on certain shape and color, we call it water, or wetness. Again, wetness is just in relation to many other things. Right? H2O, based on that, we label it as wet, but also in relation to how we perceive it. How we see it, someone else may totally see it differently, like hot and cold, right? It's cold in relation to that person's body, and heat in relation to another person's body. So it's only in relation to that we call it this, that, and the other. In and of itself, it's not wet. Okay? There's no objective wetness. In other words. Okay, great. Alright, so in this context, actually, there are 4 errors here that are implied here. So the impermanent appears as permanent. The 5 aggregates, so if you take the body and mind, the sense that they are permanent, or that they are not in the nature of suffering, or that they are not contaminated, okay, the result of misperceptions of reality, and that they have a self. Those are the wrong views with regard to ourselves. So 4 wrong views. Okay? Wrong views that are in relation to, talk about the 4 Noble Truth, 16 aspects. Right? You've all heard about the 16 aspects. So it is said that in order to understand the first truth, the truth of suffering, what is the truth of suffering? What do we mean with the truth of suffering? We mean this body and this mind. It's in the nature of suffering, with which we mean not that it is suffering, we mean it's prone to experience problems. It is almost programmed to experience suffering. Our own mind, because of the mind we have right now, we cannot help it, but we will experience problems with this mind and body. And how else do we experience problems? Really, we say, I suffer. Well, either it's our body that suffers, body consciousness, or it's the mental consciousness. There's no other way of experiencing suffering. Therefore, body and mind, when you look at body and mind, to understand its suffering nature, you understand that it's impermanent, first of all. That's one of the reasons why we suffer. Because whatever happiness we experience, it cannot last. And even that's the first one. So, believing that this is actually happiness, well, whatever happiness we experience, it never lasts. Secondly, even that happiness is in the nature of suffering. Because it's not actual happiness. It's just the absence of something worse. And this mind is right now, it says impure. Impure doesn't mean impure in a way like, oh my mind. Like, it's a weird word. It doesn't have that weird connotation in Tibetan. It kind of means it's not its purest form, our mind and body, because our mind and body are influenced by misperception. So we have this extremely pure mind that's actually there, but right now it's contaminated, as in like it's influenced by something that actually harms it. That's our wrong perception of reality. Why? Because we perceive a self, where there is no self. We perceive a solid I that is more precious than others, which is the fourth view of the self. So in actuality, our body and our mind are changing all the time. They're permanent. They are in the nature of suffering. They're in the nature of right now. We cannot experience pure happiness. Thirdly, it's influenced by a misperception of reality, and there's no self. Okay? So once you understand that, then you can truly understand the first truth, which is called the truth of dukkha, the truth of the unsatisfactory nature of our existence right now. Now, those four views are mentioned as a wrong view. We're talking about previously we talked about how do anger and attachment arise in dependence on pleasant and unpleasant feelings. Now we're talking about how does ignorance, how does a misapprehension arise? Well, in dependence on a mistaken view, on a mistaken appearance. This mind and body, which are actually impermanent, to perceive them as permanent, to perceive them in the nature of happiness, and so forth. Okay? Now, the analysis here is, we say, it is this and it's not that. Okay, we're right, conventional, we're right about that. It is not permanent. Alright, this is a mistake. But then we perceive it to be inherently impermanent. That's also a mistake. Okay? It's only conventionally impermanent. So if we draw this distinction, like this is right, this is wrong, we have to be careful. Because saying, this is right, it's still not inherently right. Yes, we got rid of the sense of permanence. We may even understand, oh right, it doesn't exist inherently, it lacks inherent existence, but then we believe that lack of inherent existence to be inherent. New problem. Right? Okay, that's all it's saying here. So, if to grasp, in verse 14, if you grasp that the view of the permanent is permanent, that is mistaken. Why is grasping at the view that what is empty is inherently impermanent? How could that not be mistaken? Both are mistaken. Right? So perceiving it as inherently permanent is just saying, oh, I need to take a break. Alright. Almost there where we got to last year. Okay. So how long do you need a break?
Until 11.
Until 11?
20 minutes?
50? 50 speed peak? Alright, great. So like 15, 20 minutes. Yeah, but play, I mean, because we still have to cover a lot, so might as well hang in there. Okay, great. If you have Pascal questions or questions you don't want to ask in person, I'll stay here. And you're welcome.